know you all are waiting to hear about that. They play tomorrow, though. They play Chicago. So I'm conflicted. Trunk or treat, Vikings in Chicago. But the game starts at 7:30, so the conflict is really not there. If you will indulge me, I'm going to sit one more week. My foot's getting much better. Thank you for the prayers. And if you're new, and my foot's been hurting for a little bit. And so, Exodus chapter 12, while you're turning there. Exodus chapter 12. Exodus chapter 12. Starting in verse 1. We'll read all the way to verse 28. So, Exodus chapter 12. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This month shall be the beginning of the months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month every man shall take a lamb according to his father's house, a lamb for a household. If a household is too small for a lamb, then he and his nearest neighbor shall take according to the number of persons, according to each what each can eat. You shall make account for the lamb. The lamb shall be without blemish, a male of a year old. It shall take it from the sheep or from the goats. And you shall keep it until the 14th day of this month, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight. Then they shall take some of the blood and put it on their doorposts and on the lintel of the house in which they eat. And they shall eat of the flesh at night, roasted on the fire with unleavened bread, bitter herbs. They shall eat it. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but roasted, its head with its legs and its inner parts. You shall let none of it remain until the morning, and any that remains until the morning you shall burn. In this manner you shall eat it. With your belt fastened, your sandals on your feet, with your staff in your hand, you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt at night, and I will strike the firstborn of the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No plague will befall or destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be a memorial day. You shall keep this feast to the Lord throughout your generations as a statute forever. You shall keep it as a feast. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove the leaven out of your house. For if anyone eats what is leavened from the first day until the seventh, that person shall be cut off from Israel. On the first day you shall hold a holy assembly, and on the seventh day a holy assembly. No work shall be done on those days, but whatever is needs to eat, that alone may be prepared by you. And you shall observe the feast of the unleavened bread, for on this day I brought your host out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a statute forever. And in the first month, from the 14th day of the month, at evening you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. For 7 days no leaven is to be found in your house. If anyone eats what is leavened, that person will be cut off from the congregation of Israel. Whether he is sojourner or a native of the land, you shall eat nothing leavened. And in the dwelling places you shall eat unleavened bread. Then Moses called the elders and said to them, "Go and select a lamb for yourselves according to your clans. Kill the Passover lamb. Take a branch of hyssop. Dip the blood that is in the basin and touch the lintel and to the doorpost with the blood in the basin. That none of you shall go out of the door of his house until the morning. For the Lord will pass through and strike the Egyptians. And when he sees the blood on the lintel and the two doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to enter your house to strike you. You shall observe this rite as a statute for you and your sons forever. When you come into the land the Lord will give you as a promise, you shall keep this service. And when your children say to you, 'What do you mean by this service?' you shall say, 'It is a sacrifice of the Lord's Passover. For he passed over the house of the people of Israel when he struck the Egyptians and spared the houses.' And the people bowed their head and worshipped." All right, long reading. This is the institution of Passover. It comes between the 9th plague and the 10th plague. And in the 10th plague, and in this passage, we get to see the precursor to the 10th plague. Notice that there is a prescribed manner in which things are to be done. Notice that there is an exacting detail within the prescribed manner in which things are to be done. Notice it is not haphazard. But I also want you to notice that there is a constant refrain. You will do X because of this. You will do X and then do this. Let's take a look, beginning in verse 1. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month shall be the beginning of the months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell the congregation that on the 10th day every man shall take a lamb according to their father's house, a lamb for a household. And the household is too small, then he is to go with his nearest neighbor. And they shall take according to the number of persons. At this time, when this feast comes around, you are to take a lamb. If your household is too small for the lamb, you buddy up with your neighbor. Now, the text here does not prescribe what it means to know how much lamb you're going to need. Later on in one of the midrashes, or in the Talmuds, one of the scholars said, well, if you factor in kids and parents, the typical number will be 10 to consume an entire lamb. So that's where a lot of people get the number 10, but that comes much later. You take a lamb. Notice it's a very prescribed method. You take a lamb. If there's not enough people in your home, there's a way to fix this. Invite your neighbor. Let's take a look a little bit more. And on a specific day, not whenever you feel like it. Now, today seems like a good day to kill a lamb and have some mutton. Very exacting time. Look at verse 8. The lamb you shall be without blemish, shall be male, a year old. You shall take it from both sheep or amongst sheep or goats. You shall keep it 14 days. And then on the evening of the 14th day, the entire assembly kills the animal at twilight. Not everybody goes over and kills their neighbor's lamb. That's going to get kind of weird, but everyone kills their own lamb at twilight. Notice the prescription or the description of the lamb. It must meet a criteria. It must meet an exacting criteria. The lamb must first be without blemish, spot, stain, illness, disease. In physical condition, perfect. Must be male. Doesn't matter whether or not there was a female candidate more qualified. It must be male. What's the other requirements? You can take it from sheep or goats. Later on, the Jews really narrow it down, saying, no, really what he really meant was sheep. No, he said sheep or goats. And on the 14th day, you kill the animal. I don't like the number 14. Too bad. So if you were to take this approach to the text in our modern hermeneutic that a lot of churches have, it would be, it had a little spot. Do you think God really cares that the lamb had this lamb just has a little speck? It'll be all right. This lamb is, it's here. Or you tweeze the hair out. Spot gone. This lamb is perfect now. I don't have any male goats. I got female goats. I'll just substitute one of those. See, a lot of times when we come to the text, we approach the text as a suggestion of good ideas that are not well-meaning because, well, we don't like those things. Too bad. Unblemished. Not unblemished after you painted it. Not unblemished after you plucked the hair out. Not unblemished after you pumped it full of antibiotics. Unblemished from the very beginning. Spotless, unstained. Sounds like a description that we will have later on, doesn't it? Male. Not whether or not it feels like it's a male. It thinks itself to be a male. It quite possibly could be having an identity crisis as a male. Male. And then on the 14th day, everyone takes it outside, holds it over a trough, takes a knife, runs it across the jugular, and bleeds the animal out. And says, man, that's kind of gross. Yeah. The animal sacrifice system wasn't a sterile environment. I mean, if you've ever cut the throat of a bleeding animal, to expect to get covered in some stuff. It's not a pleasant process. And the purpose of the bowl, as we will see later on, but we will see a refrain. You select a goat or a sheep, it's got to be perfect. It's got to be sinless. It's got to be blemishlessness. And the example that we understand now today when we look at this here is that the sacrifice made for us was spotless, without blemish, male, executed for his blood. Let's keep looking. Here's the refrain. Take a bow, you kill it twilight. Take some of the blood and put it on the doorposts and the lintel in the house in which you eat. You're going to have a description of things to do, and then you're going to have this refrain of, you take the blood and you put it on the doorposts, or you take the blood, or you save the blood, or you have the blood. And this will be a constant refrain within this passage here. They shall eat the flesh that night, roasted on a fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. The consequence or the significance of the meal is designed to show a meal that is made in haste. It is cooked as a whole animal, not carved up, not butchered. I don't like goat intestine. Too bad. I only want dark meat. I don't know if lambs have dark meat and like chickens and bird soup, but can I get a leg quarter? Can you smother it with butter? Put a little mint and jelly on the side. Oh, yeah. Can I get the lamb with some mint jelly? I really like Cracker Barrel biscuits. Can I get some Cracker Barrel biscuits? And I don't really like bitter herbs. I've never known of anybody who says, man, I could crush me some bitter herbs right now. I mean, how many of you smell the lettuce head when you pick it up at Walmart? How many of y'all do that test? Yeah? Seriously? None of y'all do the, I see one hand out of, one hand. Oh, I'm about ready to say, Y'all don't do that? You can grab the lettuce, you smell the base, smells bitter, you put it back. Or you hand it to the other person. Oh, this one's good. Enjoy. None of y'all do that? Just me. Notice in the prescribed manner, there's no flexibility here. The feast is designed to demonstrate haste. The bitter herbs, why do we eat bitter herbs? It's remembrance. It is designed for the children of Israel to remember the suffering that they went through and the bitterness that was there. All of this is designed to teach and draw to a specific point, the blood. All that what we do today is designed to draw to a specific point, the blood. Everything else, it becomes a distraction. Do not eat any of it raw, but I like my meat medium rare. You are stuck. Like Chuck in this situation. They're cooking this dude well done. My standards, they've ruined a good piece of meat. But I'm not the Lord, and I'm not overriding this decree. It is to be cooked thoroughly. You can't boil it because it must remain intact. You cook it with its entrails inside with the head attached. Ugh. And eat it all. Notice the specificity of these decrees. It's not, I know some of you don't like sausage casing. You'll be all right. You'll be fine. I have never once thought, man, I could pound. I do not eat livers. Not even at gunpoint. My mama tried to slip in some beef liver one day and said it was steak. And I looked at my mom and I said, Mama, it's a sin to lie. When I came to, I covered that dude with tons of Heinz 57. It did not help the flavor. They were to consume the entire animal. Well, what happens if you do not consume the entire animal? Well, God leaves a provision for that. And none of it shall remain until morning, and if there anything remains, it shall be utterly consumed by fire. Nothing is to be left. Why? Because you're to eat with your belt fastened. That's an odd phrase. What does it mean to eat with your belt fastened? Well, I know at Thanksgiving time, a lot of us eat with our belts unfastened. Right? We wear stretchy sweatpants to that buffet that's on the table, and then we kick back into a tryptophan catatonic state watching a football game. That's not what he's talking about here. This is a belt that goes around the outer garment in preparation for a journey. You are to eat with your clothes ready to leave. You are to eat with the sandals on your feet, because when the Lord goes through Egypt and kills all the firstborn, Pharaoh is not going to give you time to get out. He's going to tell you to go. Get off my grass, time to go. With your staff in your hand. We come to this with a modern hermeneutic at times. You have some denominations come and say, well, what God means is you could have your shoes by the door, your coat on a peg, and your staff by the door to where you could grab it on the way out. I don't like mutton. I don't like bitter herbs. I don't like this. And what God really means here is that, as long as you're close. Do you see how long is your close description within this text? It is very exacting. You will eat. What is left is burned with fire. You shall eat it with your shoes on. You shall be ready to leave. Your belt will be around your outer gear to where you're ready to go. Your staff is in your hand. Well, it's hard to eat mutton with one hand. Figure it out. That is the command. But I don't like it that way. Too bad. Check this out. Here's the second refrain. In this manner you shall eat it with the belt fast, and as you drop down, it is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt at night, and I will strike the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt will I execute justice. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague will not destroy you. Description, blood. Description, blood. All of these things are designed to point to the purpose of what the blood does. And as we continue to read, we see more and more of what the blood does. The blood designates to the Lord that this is a house that he will pass over, but this is a house in which he will kill. This is a house that he will pass over, but this is a house in which he will kill. This is a house that he will pass over, but this is a house in which he will kill. This day shall be a memorial day. You shall keep it as a feast to the Lord. Throughout your generations, a statute forever, you shall keep this feast. It's not something we do this one time. It's not something we do and then we forget about it. Or it's not something we do and then we begin to add things into it. Well, I like bitter herbs, but they go down really good with a little ranch. You dip them bitter herbs in that ranch dressing, you suck them down all day long. Lord, have you ever fried them in fat? Man. Dip in a little cornmeal, a little bit of batter, fry that dude up, you can choke down a whole mess of bitter herbs there, Lord. This is to be done in a prescribed way, and is to be done generationally, and is to be taught to the next generation. It is something in which the Lord is instituting with the nation that he is bringing out of Egypt, that is to be done regularly at a set time, within a set month, on a certain timeline, and you are to perform each and every task. Because this is the Lord's Passover. It's not your Passover. This is the Lord's table. It's not your table. On the first let's see here, go back. 7 day, back even further. For this day shall be a memorial. You shall keep a feast. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove all the leaven out of your houses. For if anyone eats leaven from the first day until the seventh day, that person will be cut off. On the first day you will hold a holy assembly. On the seventh day you will hold a holy assembly. No work shall be done on those days. But what anyone needs to eat, that alone may be prepared. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, and on the very day I brought you, for on this very day I brought the host out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day through your generations as a statute forever. In the first month, from the 14th day at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month of the evening. For 7 days no leaven is to be found in your house. And anyone who eats of leaven, that person will be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is sojourner or a native of the land. You shall eat nothing leavened. In your dwelling places you shall eat unleavened bread. Do you think he's kidding about the leaven? Twice he says, if you eat a raised cake of any kind, I'll be angry with you. Boy, are you going to go to the corner. You will be at the back of the procession. Is that what he said? If you eat of any unleavened bread at all within those 7 days, you are cut off. You are excommunicated from the fellowship of Israel and the fellowship with God. If you take of it unworthily, if you take of it, and it's just a little, look, and not only are you not supposed to eat it, but it's not to be found in your home. For those of you that do not bake and you're wondering, what is leaven? It's simply yeast. Yeast is inert. And put a packet of yeast right here on the counter. It will do nothing until it's put in something. You want to make a huge loaf of bread? Throw that whole packet in your bread bowl. Make some alcohol, throw a packet of yeast in there. Wouldn't advise it, but hey, in a couple of days that yeast will activate and man, it'll go to town. It's nothing. As a matter of fact, if I were to sprinkle it on a counter, many of you would think it's dust. It's nothing. It's inert. But you better not have any of it in your home. Yeast and leaven is tied so much to sin that the text uses it as an adjective for sin. It is to be cast out. It is to be placed outside the house. For 7 days you will eat matzah. Any of you ever had a matzah cracker? That's why you have the bitter herb. There's not, the ones I've had really don't have a lot of salt in them, and they're flat. I mean, like cracker flat. So it's like eating cardboard. You want to know what it's like? Go eat some cardboard. I mean, this meal is not designed to appeal to your palate to be pleasing for you. It is designed to show the haste in which you will leave Israel. It is designed to be a teaching tool that you left in such haste that you did not have time to put yeast in your flour to make bread. It was designed in such a case that you did not have time to draw and quarter the animal and cut out its innards, that you cooked it whole so that you would have something for the travel to eat. And the bitter herbs are there designed to constantly remind you of the dead children that went into the Nile and the people that's lived under slavery for 430 years. These elements are not here for you to get a little snack mid-morning. It's not like you when we go to Sam's on Sunday and you go around and you collect all the free samples, that way you don't have to eat for lunch. Paul gives a prescribed manner of how we take of these. We don't partake of these with unclean hands. We don't partake of these with sin in our heart. We don't partake of these while having a grudge against a brother or a sister. We don't partake of these with unconfessed sin, because when we do, we invite the wrath of God upon our own life. That's the prescribed way in which we partake of these elements. These are to be something that are to be taught. It was announced in the bulletin last week that we were doing Lord's Supper. How many of you spent the week preparing for the Lord's Supper? How many of you spent the week training your family what these elements mean? How many of you spent time this week preparing your heart for the act of worship that is, as opposed to, it's just the Lord's Supper, I'll just take of it and move on? How many of you took time to go through the sins of your life that are unconfessed, so your heart is prepared, so you don't have to, as the minute I brought that up, go, oh Lord, please forgive me of all my sin that I've committed on this week. I know that there are many and I can't remember them all, but Lord, please forgive me, because, after all, I sinned so bad and it's so horrible, but I want to take part of the Lord's Supper, and so Lord, please forgive me for all my sin. Check block, I'm good. But we're going to go and take this. There's leaven in the house, and you eat it, you are cut off. There's no blood on the doorpost, your son is dead. Man, if we were to approach the Lord's Supper with that kind of holiness. We treat this as common, and behave though as commonly. What a shame. Here's the second refrain. Then Moses called, or the third refrain. Then Moses called and said to them, go and select for yourself a lamb according to the clans, and kill the Passover lamb, and take a branch of hyssop and dip it in the blood at the basin, and touch it to the lintel and the doorpost, and that the blood that is in the basin. None of you shall go out of the house. Do this, blood. Do this, blood. Do this, blood. Why? For the Lord will pass through the land and strike the Egyptians. And when he sees the blood on the lintel of the two doorposts, he will pass over. When he sees the blood, he moves to the next house that was not obedient. And in that house, he kills the firstborn. Male. Human, animal. No distinction. When he sees the blood, he passes over. This, what is being described here in Exodus, is what we call in theological terms as expiation. It is the cancellation of the debt. When he sees the blood, it's canceled. Basically, the pain and the penalty of the death is kicked down the road. When we take of this is both expiation and propitiation. Not only is the sin canceled, it's canceled through propitiation, which is God satisfying his wrath in the body of the Son by executing the Son in our place and shedding his blood to cover us. This is the prelude to this. And we come to it commonly. I've come to it commonly. I have approached it as simply nothing more than bread and juice. What a tragedy. What a shame. D.A. Carson, in a YouTube video, if you want to see what he says, he'll say it far more eloquently than I will, but I will give him credit because it originates with him. When he discusses the atonement, he discusses this event. If you want to see it, type in D.A. Carson, the Atonement. He will do a far better job than I will, but I will give it a try. He says, imagine on that first Passover. Imagine, if you will, on that first Passover, you have two Jewish men, one named John and Dave, very Jewish sounding names. And John looks at Dave and said, you ready for the Passover? Dave says, yeah, I am, but man, I'm worried. John looks at Dave and says, what are you worried? Dave goes, well, you know, what if God doesn't see the blood? John's response is, well, you know, you've killed the animal, you've prepared the food, you've dipped the branch of hyssop in and painted your doorposts, you've done that. Well, yeah, but I mean, you got to understand. I mean, there's been some weird stuff go down. I mean, we've seen a river turn blood red. We've seen frogs crawl out of the Nile and everything. Flies, maggots, locusts, burning hail, boils, animals falling over dead. And then darkness. There's some weird stuff. I'm a little worried. Would you put the door? Yes, and I believe that the blood is there. But you know, and John looks at David and says, I'm not afraid. Bring it on. Do you know which man's son died that night? Neither. Because it wasn't in the veracity of their faith that the Lord passed over the house. It was the blood of the spotless lamb that brought salvation. It is not the veracity of your faith that saves you. That is an exflow or an outflow of what is done for you. But what saves you and I is the blood of the sinless lamb. The accuser will come to you and accuse you of all the things that you are not. The accuser will come to you and point out all the flaws in the life that you have and tell you that you are insufficient for God's love and His grace. And the only thing that silences the accuser is the fact that your response is, I have no other plea than the blood of Jesus covers me. And then, when it's time to celebrate it, we come to this table commonly. And we look at the cup as though it's insignificant. And we look at the wafer as though it's meaningless. But we want it to cover us when the time comes. The purpose of why we do communion is not to make us feel good. That is not the purpose. It is to be memorial. It is to be remembrance. It is to be taught. It is to be a method by which we train individuals into what these elements mean. And they are simply not bread, and they are simply not juice. They are the broken body of Jesus Christ, and they are the shed blood that covers us from our sin. And they are to be approached with a sense of holiness. They are to be approached with a sense of reverence. They are to be approached with clean hands. Folks, it is not in the veracity of your faith that saves you. It is the shed blood of the sinless Lamb that saves you. And in so doing, the outflow of that salvation is a life lived in faith, through faith, and by faith. I'm going to take a moment. We're going to pause. Where you are, you're going to bow your head. And you're going to quietly approach this table reverently. I will be up here to approach this table reverently. This is an opportunity where if you have unconfessed sin in your life, it is the opportunity for you to take before you take of this. Would to God there should never be a moment like this before Lord's Supper. We should all be prepared. We will take of this and have an opportunity to set right before the Lord the things in our mind. If you have something against a neighbor that you cannot set right in this prayer, then I urge you not to take. Do not invite upon yourself judgment and condemnation because you would feel pressured to not take. As we bow our heads and approach the Lord's table, let us take a moment of silence. As the deacons come forward, if you'll please raise your hand.